Good evening, everyone. And here comes Candy the Wonder Pup, right on cue. She always comes to my right side now. Anyway, it's Gordon Causey, as always. This is Candy, who didn't, you know what? She has been spoiled today. She has been spoiled. She got roast beef leftovers. She's had plenty of treats. She got to go to a soccer game. She got out for a walk. She's had lots of love. She got off her leash twice, although she's good. She sits, but she gets distracted and wrestles out of her collar. There are rabbits and birds and goodness knows what else around. Go lay down. Go lay down. No, you've had enough. Go. No. Good girl. All right. Sorry about the distraction. If you're new to my channel, this is the start to everyone. Candy has conditioned me to give her a TREAT at the start of every video. And now I just, even spelling the word, she knows what it means. So go lay down. Go lay down. Good girl. Anyway, today is Wednesday, the 24th of July. It's 10:39 p.m. in my time zone, the Eastern time zone. That's Toronto, New York City, Montreal, you know the drill. And wanted to talk today about DEI. I already have Whale Oil Beef has put up a comment asking diversity, equity, and inclusion. Yes, that is what DEI stands for, either inclusion or inclusiveness. And this is a tough nut to crack, genuinely, because who wants to be against diversity? You're opposed to diversity. You're opposed to equity. You're opposed to being inclusive. You want to exclude people. You're a snob. You're racist. You're this, you're that, the other. And this branding is very effective. And I wanted to give some perspective on where I'm approaching this from. Look at me, I'm an old white guy. I mean, I tick every box when it comes to cancel culture. I'm older, 58. I'm white, Caucasian. I'm straight. I'm a professing Christian. Yeah, well, you know, I'm supposed to have no say, no voice in the public discourse because I'm part of the dominant group or whatever. We've all heard the messaging. We've all come across these woke types, and unless you have enough ticks in the box, well, then you shut up and sit down. You know, if you want to be listened to, it's gotten to the point where you pretty much have to be a disabled Aboriginal female with a homosexual orientation. It's insane the way this world is going. But again, I want to give some flavor, let people know where I'm approaching things from. So I'm going to open up a little about my life experience, my time growing up. As I've mentioned many times, I am a Canadian born. When I was about 6 months of age, our family moved to New York City. My dad worked for a financial institution for one of what they call the big six Canadian banks. In Canada, we have six banks that kind of dominate the financial sphere. My dad worked for one of them, and they had offices in New York City. So we were down there for a number of years, from the time I was 6 months old. And from New York City, we gravitated toward New Jersey eventually. Bergen County, to be specific, little town of Glen Rock in northern New Jersey. I make that distinction because, you know, people talk about southern New Jersey being all chemical plants and nuclear power plants and things like that. That tends more towards the south. The southern part of New Jersey is very industrial, very blue collar. The northern part of New Jersey tends, you know, that's the Garden State. And where we lived, in particular, Bergen County, was very close to Manhattan, very close to New York City. My dad would take the train into work every morning and arrive at, I think it was probably a 20 or so minute train ride, commuter train ride into Pennsylvania Station. I think that's where he got off. And yeah, I was there until I was 9, until I was in grade 4. And during that grade 4 year, we moved back to Canada for a short time, and my dad worked downtown Toronto. But his interest was always international banking. And without getting into it, the reasons, what happened was he ended up being more or less pushed aside, and he was sent out to Portland, Oregon, where the bank he worked for was opening up retail branches in the city of Portland. And as memory serves, when we moved there, there were already 3 branches, and his was to be the 4th, and he was going to manage the branch. He wasn't thrilled. My dad was not thrilled with this. He had been running the bond trading desk in New York and things of that nature. He liked international banking. Now he was going to be at a local branch, and instead of international bonds, he was going to have some old lady saying, "Do I get a free toaster if I open a savings account?" Yeah. But he put heart and soul into opening up his branch. And it was located on a street in downtown Portland. The name of the street was Halsey Avenue. I think it was Avenue. I know it was Halsey. If there's anyone who ever watches this who is from Portland, whether it's Halsey Boulevard, Halsey Street, Halsey Road, I think it was Halsey Avenue. And at that time, and this is 1977 we're talking about now, to give that some context, 1977, we moved in as the Portland Trailblazers were defeating the Philadelphia 76ers for that year's NBA title. We moved right into what they called Blazer Mania. I remember we were staying at a hotel or while we waited for our house to be ready. At any rate, the branch that my dad was going to be running was on Halsey Avenue, which was something of the dividing line in Portland between black and white. One side of the street, as you moved in one direction, it was white, and the other side of the street, as you moved in the opposite direction, it was black. And sadly, that still exists in a lot of the United States. There are still black areas and white areas. And the side of the street that my dad was on was actually the black side of the street. And as you would move further in, it would get more black. And as you moved further away in the other direction, it would become more white. At any rate, my father, wanting his branch to be representative of the area in which it was operating, made a point of hiring several women, black tellers. He wanted his branch to be representative of the community in which it was operating. And it was an area that was, it was in a black area of town, like Harlem, like Watts, like different. Unfortunately, this is reality in the United States. And so, and especially in 1977, maybe things have gotten a bit better now. I don't know. I haven't lived in the United States since finishing grade 6. I've been back a number of times. I don't think things have changed that much, but perhaps there are those who will want to comment and educate me. I do also have the live chat on because I always do my videos, almost always, 99% of the time, my videos are live. It's just easier to do it that way. And I do them unscripted. This is all unscripted off the cuff. The only thing I wrote down, I do sometimes write down little bullet points, and that disabled Aboriginal female with a homosexual orientation, I wrote that down. Just wasn't sure I could keep it all in my head. DEI. At any rate, when the actual grand opening of the branch came, some big wigs, some top brass came down from Toronto, which is corporate headquarters for a Canadian bank, obviously. And they flew down to Portland. And I remember my dad had strep throat. The stress of everything, getting everything open, the hiring, everything. I think the stress had gotten to him and he had strep throat. And I remember very well, these guys were here from Toronto, and I was shunted down to my bedroom down the hall. I lived in a two-story house. It was kind of a ranch-style bungalow with an upstairs and a downstairs. And downstairs, it included a wet bar. And down the hall, that's where my bedroom was. So I was told to get lost and to stay in my room and do whatever, read a book. This is before the days of video games and such. And so I went down the hall, did whatever. And all of a sudden I heard my dad swearing. And my father was not a man to swear. I won't go into details about it, but the only thing he would ever really say is, that bugs my ass. That really bugs my ass. That would be about as far as it would go. Certainly never an F-bomb until years later when I got older. And if we were on the basketball court, if we were on a hockey rink, or if we were playing baseball or something, then, he was one who you don't talk that way around women. Anyway, I'm diverting. Anyway, it wasn't until years later that I found out what happened, what the explosion was over. And what happened was the guys from head office, my mother told me this story. The guys from head office asked my dad, they said, what are you going to do for your grand opening? And through his strep throat, my dad said, there's nothing new under the sun. I'm just going to do coffee and donuts like everyone. And one of the guys from head office in Toronto said, don't do that. In your neighborhood, every coon will be coming from 3 blocks around, or something very close to that effect. And my mom was insistent that they use the word coon, which, if you're not familiar, it's not as bad as the N word, but it's a very derogatory term. And my dad lost it. And again, I get this from my mother because my dad wouldn't talk about it, that your father threatened to kick their asses all the way back to Toronto if they came in and told him how to run his branch. I just offer that up to give you some of my perspective on this is the way I was brought up. I can go further. When I was back living in Canada, in Pickering, Ontario, which is on the eastern end of the GTA, although the GTA has expanded a lot in recent years. When we moved there, Ajax Pickering was pretty much the end of the GTA. Now it goes out all the way pretty much to Bowmanville. But regardless, so I was probably about 15, 16 working. I had part-time jobs, Mickey D's, or at a gas station. I had a number of different jobs when I was in high school. And I got a mosquito in the house. The joys of, super high production values on this wonderful, on this, super high class YouTube channel. At any rate, it was during when I was 15, 16, in and around there. This was during the days of the Dukes of Hazzard and the General Lee and Daisy Dukes and Bo and Luke and Uncle Jesse and Cooter and Enos and Sheriff Roscoe and all the rest. And the car, the Dodge Charger that Bo and Luke drove, they called it the General Lee, and it had the stars and bars. It had the Confederate flag emblazoned on the hood of the car. And on the roof too, I think, or rather over the engine too. And I saw the Confederate flag at that age. For me, it represented rebellion. And what 14, 15, 16-year-old kid, especially a boy, isn't at least somewhat rebellious? And so I was at a flea market where they were selling flags of all manner and all descriptions. And so I purchased a Confederate flag, came home, and put it over my bed. And when my mother saw it, she had a cow. and told me to get that racist symbol out of her house. And I was, I was in full defense mode. It's not a racist symbol. It's rebellion. It's Bo and Luke Duke, Daisy Dukes. And then I got an education on the Civil War. And, state rights. Some states wanted the right to have slaves. That was what the war was about. Apologists for the South will say, well, it had to do with state rights and stuff. And and economics. Yeah, state rights, you wanted the right to hold slaves because economically you didn't want to pay the help. At any rate, she got through to me. My mom was an amazing woman. She got through to me, and I ended up going back to the flea market and exchanging my Confederate flag for a Canadian flag and put that over my bed. I'm sorry, I got mosquitoes. You open that back door for a nanosecond and letting the dog in or out, and you get at least 4 or 5 mosquitoes coming with you. Which brings me to the discussion now on DEI, and again, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or inclusiveness. I'm just going to say inclusion. And I can't do this without mentioning the fact that Joe Biden just finally, after I don't know how many days after that letter came out announcing that he was withdrawing from the race and that he would no longer be seeking re-election, he finally gave an address to the American people and the world, putting voice to the words on that page and saying that he is indeed dropping out of the race. And it was filled with the normal rhetoric. I think we hear this every election is the most important election. I've been hearing this since I was 16 years old, probably hearing this since I was a kid, living in New Jersey when McGovern ran against Nixon and got steamrolled after the Watergate conspiracy was revealed. Every election is the most important election. And apart from very much looking like a deer in the headlights, I had to watch it at double speed because listening to Biden at regular speed, just normal speed, it's painful. At least if you double the speed, he almost sounds like a normal human being. And one of the things he said right at the beginning, right near the beginning, within the first minute or two, and it was only a 10 or 12 minutes speech. It wasn't a long speech, but right near the beginning, within the first 1 or 2 minutes, he talked about continuing their goal toward pursuing perfection. I don't know exactly how he framed it. I know he didn't write the speech, but whoever wrote it said, that they're moving toward perfection. And individuals far smarter than I have come out with this very familiar bromide that many should be familiar with. And it is this, that perfect is the enemy of the good, because perfect on this side of the veil is not possible. Perfect is impossible. We will never achieve perfection. But what happens in our world is that in pursuit of perfection, we throw away that which is good. And that's what I see happening in the United States and in Canada. Where is worse? I have no idea. Is it worse in Canada? Is it worse in the US? I have a Canadian perspective for the most part. I tend to think it's worse here. But then I look at the undersecretary, I think that's the title is Undersecretary of Health. It's this overweight guy who likes to wear women's naval, I guess he's a naval officer, and he likes to wear the female version. He's like, what's the old director of the FBI? Was that Hoover, who was a famous cross-dresser? We haven't seen anything like that in Canada yet. And also there's that other guy who with the big mustache but a bald head, who likes to get dressed up and has been found guilty, I think, of stealing luggage at airports and things. He's a kleptomaniac. He's got, beyond just the fact that he, is a cross-dresser, which is an issue that's neither here nor there. Hank Holliday is here from, I know Hank is from Texas, and I don't know if you watched the previous, what I've been saying up until now, or if you're just jumping on now, but it's about, from where I sit, I still believe the U.S. is very racially divided, that cities still have predominantly black, predominantly white areas. It wasn't that long ago. It was in around the year 2003, 4, somewhere around there. I had a friend in Pickering, or Ajax. I was living out that way again. And my eldest son was going to a preschool. And one of the other dads was David, who was from Indiana. And he and I became very good friends. And we went out golfing, and super guy. And Dave, black gentleman from Indianapolis, his wife was from Ohio. But David told me he and his wife, his family, they'd moved into a beautiful home that I just thought was gorgeous. And I'd just been over. And as we were playing golf, I said to David, I said, man, I love your house. It's just beautiful. It was one of these houses that was very unassuming from the front, but then when you walk in, it went on forever, and it had a huge backyard with a fire pit. Oh, I loved it. And he said, oh, thanks a lot. I love it. I love that place. I got 5 bathrooms, one for each day of the week. I just got to constipate myself on the weekends. And I said, yeah, love the house. And he goes, yeah, I love it too. But, when we moved here, I didn't know if we could move in there. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, in Indy, I can buy any house I want. You can't stop me. But I know in some neighborhoods that if I move in with my family, we're going to have a pickup truck with 5 angry white boys in the flatbed. And then he said, but y'all don't have that here in Canada. And I looked at him and I said, well, maybe in South Oshawa. And he laughed. Hank Holliday, sadly, is writing that, oh, yeah. And he believes that we will be seeing cities burning again after the election. And I found Biden's rhetoric to be disappointing. If you don't vote the way he wants you to vote, it's a threat to democracy. It's reminiscent to me of the 2020 election campaign when he said, if you're not, he said to a black individual, if you're not voting for me, you ain't black. Or words very close to that effect. I want to get on to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I was engaged in a bit of a dialogue, for lack of a better word, call it a flame war, if you like, on Facebook with someone who is all in on DEI. And I said, do you practice that personally? When you're looking to hire a contractor, a plumber, electrician, someone to do roofing or, whatever around your house, do you worry about DEI then? Or do you just want to hire the best possible person, the most qualified person for the job, who's going to give you the best value for your money? And ultimately, and this is where, perfection is the enemy of the good. Perfection is thought to be, well, half the workplace in any given industry group will be half women, half men. And the people saying this can't even tell you what a woman is. They'll be half and half, and it'll be completely representative. If 20% of the population is black, then 20% will be, of the people in that industry group at all levels, at all strata, will also be black, and And ultimately, it comes down to who's the best qualified for the job. And I do get this notion. The one aspect, when the United States in 2008, when the U.S. elected Barack Obama as the first president of color, I'll put it that way, although there's some debate as to whether some people believe that Abraham Lincoln may have also been biracial. It's said that his hair was very coarse and wiry, and some suspected that he might have had, Black American, someone slept with someone in his family tree. Who knows? But Barack Obama, for all intents and purposes, he's Black. If he went walking down the street and someone asked, "Is that man Black or white?" they would say he's Black. And I thought it was a positive thing, irrespective of his politics, because it demonstrated not just to Americans, but to the world, that your ability to attain the highest seat in the land, the highest elected position in the United States of America, is not restricted to those who are simply, white men. I since had some problems with his politics, but at least there was a positive aspect in that, because racism is ultimately stupid. And when it comes to going back to my dad's experience when he was running a simple bank branch in Portland, Oregon, right on the border, but on the Black side of the street in a Black area of Portland, Oregon, he made a point of hiring Black tellers. And the reason he did that is he wanted to be representative. And let's face it, in a lot of ways, a bank teller, it's an entry-level position regardless. And it's a position from whence someone can gain experience and then maybe move up. But you first have to get your foot in the door. And who's the most qualified? The qualifications are not, you don't need to have an Ivy League bachelor's degree or master's degree or PhD. You need a high school diploma and maybe some college courses to be a teller. Anyway, I'm going to catch up to what's being read. Whale Oil Beef is writing, I used to think BBB was a telltale for good value market choices, but now I know it's mostly a club. I think he's talking about the Better Business Bureau. I don't know a lot about the Better Business Bureau. And you don't see it that much anymore. A retail establishment used to it was one B on top of another, proud member of the BBB or something like that, or proud member of the Better Business Bureau. And it would make you think, oh, okay, I'm patronizing a quality business. Is that true or not? Well, Oil Beef doesn't seem to think so. Jason King says, good evening. Racism only breathes if you let it in. True. But at the same time, there's a lot of racism that's under the surface. There are a lot of people who keep their racism, they hold their cards close to their chest. And it's only in certain circumstances, only when they feel emboldened, that they'll let their cards drop. I am a bit of an irreverent smartass. And I have, at times, an acerbic sense of humor. And I'll give you an example of my sense of humor. One time, friends of mine, man and woman, married couple, had just come back from South Korea, where they were teaching English as a foreign language. And they had bought one of those large box kites. In Korea, kite flying is very popular. Now, I'll say their names, who cares? Bruce, just regular guy, Canadian, not even sure of his ethnic background, but his wife was Jewish. And they were coming to stay at my place. Because they were living in Korea, they were back over the Christmas season. They didn't have any place, so they were spending time with her folks, his folks, this friend, that friend. They were shuttling around for about 6 weeks, and they were leaving one couple's house, and they were coming to mine. I was over there picking them up, and we're getting ready to go. And we're all gathered in the front foyer of the front entranceway to the apartment. And then Bruce or someone said, "Wait a minute, where's Andrea?" That's Bruce's wife. No, I got it wrong. How did it go? Oh yeah, they said, "Oh yeah." Someone said, don't forget the kite. Where's the kite? Because they had a large box kite. So they said, "Where's the kite?" And I, being a smart ass, said, "Oh, Andrea's in the back room." And they all looked at me like, "What are you talking about, Andrea? We're asking where the kite is." And I went, "Oh, kite. I'm sorry. I thought you said kite." And I meant it as a joke. And they laughed. They laughed. It was like, "Oh, that is so horrible. Oh." And it was like, it's a joke. And I was doing it, just amongst, and now I'm sharing it on the internet, and I'm probably going to get slaughtered for it. But I have a bit of an irreverent sense of humor. I grew up listening to people like Don Rickles, for goodness sakes, and John Biner. And so, but diversity, equity, and inclusion, look at what happened on July 13th with, everyone is looking at that woman, that pudgy, let's face it, she's overweight, short, overweight, and can't holster a gun. What is she doing protecting a president of the United States? And it's it is funny on one level, but it's deadly serious also. And we are in so much trouble in this world if we abandon the good in seeking out perfection. It's this whole idea of equality of opportunity is a great thing. But instead of that, what we have is people pushing for equality of outcome. And when you place equality of outcome as your perfect ideal destination and that which must be achieved, then what happens is disaster, like we saw on July 13th. Well, okay, we're great. We've got half of our Secret Service agents are women. And we have our requisite number of homosexuals or people suffering from gender confusion who don't know what sex they are, or don't know their gender. And we've got this and we got that, and we just get the best people for the job. And unfortunately, it's an evolutionary process, and we're not perfect yet. But things are better than they were in the 90s, and 90s were better than the 80s, and 80s were better than the 70s. Things have gotten enormously better. But we're just going to make it worse by trying to force quota systems. And where does it end? Are we going to insist that all daycares have 50% male employees now? Or is it only in certain sectors where we pursue this DEI stuff? Hank Holiday is saying, "Soon we'll have draft of women. What do I think?" The U.S. hasn't had a draft, a military draft, since 1980, 1981, somewhere around there. The Vietnam War ended in 1975, and during the Vietnam War, only men could be drafted, and that continued right up until 1980, 1981. And then the U.S. switched to an all-volunteer army, and it's been that way ever since. Now, I have not heard any talk about them reinstituting the draft in the United States. But if they do reinstitute the draft and include women, I'm a bit of an old dinosaur, and at least in terms of the combat arms, and by that I mean infantry, artillery, armored tanks, combat engineers, people coming into the direct line of fire, I'm sorry, guys only. That's my opinion. And I know that in the Canadian military, I'm not sure when, but they did open up the combat trades, the combat arms to women as well, strictly on a volunteer basis. We haven't, in point of fact, we've never technically had a draft in Canada, even during World War I and World War II. Mackenzie King, William Lyon Mackenzie King, the Prime Minister of Canada during the Second World War, instead of the draft, we called it conscription. And he said, well, conscription is necessary, but it's not necessarily conscription. And the means by which someone could get out of being conscripted was not overly difficult. There are a couple hurdles you had to go over to if you didn't want to serve, but you could get out. You could not be conscripted if you were. If you got drafted, you could get out of it. You'd have to, as I say, you'd have to jump through a couple, 3 hurdles. But if you were willing to do that, you got out. So he came out with this famous line in Canadian history: conscription is necessary, but it's not necessarily conscription. Anyway. And Jason King is writing, no war, no draft, we need Trump. I am almost becoming a Trumper. Almost. There it is. The Canadian version of the MAGA hat. I actually wore it for the first time, went out today to the grocery store and put it on. And I was curious to see how people reacted to it, because it's the right color. You know, it's that MAGA red, and it's got the white lettering, and the first word is make, and the last word is again. So it's the Canadian version of the MAGA hat, make Trudeau a drama teacher again. But this has become something of a political statement. If you wear a red hat with white lettering, it denotes that you're part of the MAGA camp. And it's almost, to a degree, it's a cult of personality. You know, Trump can walk on water. Trump can do no wrong. Trump is, you know, God's appointed president for the United States. And I do not go that far. I do, you know, in terms of, would I vote for him if I was an American, if I held American citizenship and was pulling a lever? Every day of the week and twice on Sunday, I'd be pulling the lever for Donald J. Trump against Joe Biden, or against, Harris. Kamala, not even quite 100% sure how you say it. But this election is going to be dirty, and I'm going to end it with my prediction. But before I do, I'm going to read what's going on. Whale Oil Beef has a comment. In my opinion, to obtain a good draft result, they'd have to pull the plug on the economy. Hunger drives ambition. There are many people who believe that the Vietnam War was an attempt to clean out the ghetto, because you could get, you were exempted from the draft if you were attending a post-secondary institution. Many will know the film National Lampoon's Animal House, where Delta House, this fraternity, you know, they're the reprobates of Faber College, wherever it was supposed to be situated, and they're all flunking out, and they end up being expelled near the end of the movie. And the Dean Wormer, tells the members of the House that you'll be happy to know that I have notified the draft board that you are now eligible to go into the draft. And so a lot of people look upon, and certainly a lot of Black Americans, a lot of academic Black Americans with academic credentials behind their names, believe that part of the rationale for the Vietnam War, maybe not all of it, but certainly part of it, was cleaning out the ghetto, getting rid of the poor and marginalized and predominantly Black citizens, you know, young men living in Harlem, in Watts, in the province of Chicago, places like Detroit. And I don't discount that theory. I think there's a lot of I think there's sound logic to it as part of the reason. I'm not saying that's the sole reason, part of it. But it strikes me in your election, I'm speaking specifically to Hank because whale oil beef, Jason, I got lots of Canadians on my channel, a few Americans, and Sharunian isn't here. Sharunian's an American. I have Thomas who comes in every now and again. He's from the Netherlands. But what I think is going to happen, I've been mulling this over today, especially, in anticipation of Biden's speech. And, he is committed to fulfilling the remainder of his term, which would run until February. So he kept saying 6 months. And yeah, it's about right. August, September, October, November, December, January. And then early in February, the new president would be sworn in. So he has about 6 months left. And I think the election voting day, I think, is November 4th. Someone correct me. Hank, you should know, you're the American. I think it's November 4th. I seem to recall hearing that date. We all know it's November. But at any rate, it strikes me that before Americans go to the polls, that they will want to install Kamala Harris as president of the United States and have Joe Biden not just drop out of the race. Hank is saying the 5th, so it's close. I was off by a day. That they're going to want to have Kamala Harris as the sitting president before people go to the polls. Now, the question is, would you want to do it early or would you want to do it late? Would you want to do it close? Would you want to do it soon, as in, before the end of July or early in August? Or would you want to wait until October or late October? And it occurs to me that it would be better to do it late, to do it in October, to do it a week or two before the actual election, because then what does Kamala Harris and whoever a running mate is, what do they get? They get positive press coverage on steroids. They get an inauguration. They get the mall filled up with people coming out to celebrate the first woman of color who's, taking the oath of office. She would become the president in the same manner in which Gerald Ford was a president of the United States. He never won an election, but he's still, I believe his portrait is hanging up in the White House with the rest of the presidents. He served in that office of president of the United States. And for those who forget, after, I don't know what year it was, maybe 1974, when Richard Nixon had been re-elected in 1972, then the Watergate conspiracy was blown open. Trying to remember the name of the two, Woodward and Bernstein, the Washington Post journalists, who found an informant, came to them and basically gave them everything they needed and exposed the conspiracy. And then Woodward and Bernstein just reported on the information that was handed to them on a silver platter about this conspiracy, where Republican operatives, with the knowledge of Richard Nixon, it's widely believed, broke into the Democratic National Committee's headquarters, which was located in the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. And, that came out, and Nixon was forced to resign, and his vice president, Gerald Ford, took office, filled that, he ended Nixon's term. And in 1976, he ran to be elected against Jimmy Carter and lost. He lost to a peanut farmer from Georgia. Whale Oil Beef is saying Camilla's father is Jamaican, mother is Indian, apparently. Yes, and I read something interesting that her father has absolutely no interest. He's an academic. I think he's at Stanford, or he's at a prestigious American university, and that he's not interested at all in seeking notoriety or public fame. Can you give me what?
I'm pretty sure Alex is calling.
I've got to go. I've got an important call. God love y'all. We'll talk to you later. Thanks. An important call. Good night.